Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so this book I started reading like 2 days ago, man. It's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And I don't know, it's just something about it that's like completely changed my perspective. And it talks about how there's different levels, right? And it starts with like programming. And you're programming, like, your conditioning, your upbringing, people that have been in your life influence programming, which then influence your thoughts. And then your thoughts influence your feelings, which influence your actions, which then influence your results. And
It's a
it talks
cycle.
about, yeah, and it talks about that so many people focus on the results and they don't think about the programming.
Yeah.
And how, like, they talk about, like, if an apple's dodgy, you should look at, like, the roots and what's under the ground, because what is underground creates what's above the ground, and what's invisible creates the visible. And it's been super
Yeah.
interesting because it's talking about, like, all this patterning and beliefs and things you're being told. And it seriously changed my mindset around our wealth, but also seeing my patterns and kind of like where that's come from.
Yeah.
And I guess what we were talking about before with is, once you expand and you kind of like find these new people that kind of
Yeah.
like vibrate at this similar level,
Yeah.
it's like also like it talks about in this book how we have financial thermostats. So, subconsciously or consciously, you believe you can create a certain amount. So, like, it might be 100K, and that's your wealth thermostat. So you're
Yeah.
never going to create more than that, because your thermostat and your beliefs and your subconscious conditioning, like, you might
Just
start making money, yeah, and then you just start spending it, or like you start giving it away, or you don't take on jobs, or maybe you get sick.
yeah.
And it's been super interesting, but it's funny because, like, the people that I've started surrounding myself, you can just sense they've got such a wealth mindset and like quite a high thermostat, and you're surrounded by ideas in a different way to kind of see things, and you're like, wow, like, you literally are limited by this thermostat, which then creates, like, let's just say thermostat's 100K, you have 100K ideas. And it's very interesting how this kind of like levels to it. And if you don't kind of, the whole five friends, closer to you thing, if you don't have an environment where you're kind of all on the same level,
Yeah.
like if you're on level this and all your friends are this, it's so hard to go to the next level, because as humans, we don't want to do things necessarily alone. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, interesting, man.
Oh man, it's so interesting talking about the financial, what we say, financial thermostat, you call it, because my
Yeah.
my girlfriend and I talk about this loads, and she was just in Vienna for a few days, and we came back. She came back last night, and um, I've had a few like nice developments within my own personal business or personal brand, and then she was also there for a company that she works with, that she contracts with, consults with. They had like a 4-day retreat there, and then she also has this accountability buddy that she'd met through a coaching course, and they catch up every fortnight, and they met for the first time, and she stayed at her place because this girl actually lives in Vienna, and Jen just came back last night, and I made us a curry, and we just sat down, and we just regurgitated all the shit that had been like running through our minds the last 4 days in terms of business. And we're really really aligned in that sense, and it's really fucking crazy because um like she's changed my mentality so much. I've always had kind of like a scarcity mindset. I've always been a saver, this and that. And there's two sides to me, because you can very easily just waste your money too. Like you can just waste your money on shit that you don't need, and I think that can also become a habit. But I think just understanding that sometimes investing something that you're going to lose money, or you're going to have less, a smaller number in the bank account now, but what that can do with it, if you just have the right mindset, and if you can see how that's like going to basically water the roots, for that apple tree, if we want to use that analogy, then what that can actually do. And she's basically just said, like, so we pay above average for our apartment here in Berlin, but for that we've got a really nice apartment in a sick location. And she's like, I just want to get to the point where, we're both freelancing, and I don't give a fuck how much I earn. And we're, that rent's not a problem here. And that I'm just paying my
Mm.
rent, and that we can use Berlin as a base, or Melbourne as a base. And then we can, work and travel a bit as well. And that mindset at first, I was like, you know, a while back, I was just kind of like, wow, that's fucking like pretty full on. But I subscribe to it now because once you change that, it just starts to happen. It just all of a sudden things just start to change. They do just start to change, and it also becomes more profound who you spend your time with. Like you start to notice, you feel a little bit like um I guess underwhelmed is probably another word I'm looking for, but there's something that you just feel like, okay, I don't align. And this isn't necessarily like a spiritual thing, but everyone, people do complement each other. People do get on to a certain extent. Like there's a reason, we just got on really well straight away without knowing each other. And there's a reason why you and the next person, or the next person and I won't. And that's totally
Yep.
okay. But, I think trying to make the most of that and trying to ride that wave is so important. And it kind of, yeah, just you see the people that are successful, they do tick differently. It's seriously nuts. And
Mm.
yeah, yeah, man, yeah, it's uh it's a full on process, I think. But um, once that happens, it starts to make you realize, as well as you were saying, we've spoken about this in the last few weeks. Like if you allow yourself to be open to that, the amount of different ideas that you have, like all of a sudden you have all these fucking big, bright, colorful ideas that you never would have thought you'd have, because you're allowing yourself to think more than, okay, I can have 8 or 10 sessions a day, and that's my maximum. This is where my cap is. All of a sudden, that just becomes one tool that you add to the toolbox. And I think there's so much more to our potential than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is where we were speaking about, like the educational courses and this and that, what we both really want to do. Like, there's nothing stopping us.
Mm. No,
So
I agree 100%. And I think I don't even know what spiritual means, but the way I kind of see like the self development work is it
mm,
literally just gets rid of the handbrake on the car that allows you to go full force. It allows you to do those things that you've always wanted to do, but you're being held back by all these beliefs. So for me, I kind of call it like the get out of my own fucking way type work.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and that completely changes it from like this stereotype of spiritual selling cacao in like, different colored t-shirt in Byron Bay. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
that doesn't
yeah,
appeal to me. But if you're like Ash, those dreams that you dream about and that potential that you know you have, unlock that. Is that something you want to do? And it's like, bang, get me in. And that's what I've seen. It's like every time I do this work, every time you, I guess, strip everything back, you have this breakthrough and it just shreds the limiting beliefs. And just like, you came into my life at the perfect time. It's like we connected. You even lived in Mentone. Here I am in Mentone now.
that's the funniest
Um,
thing, is like you quite literally live like half a kilometer from where I lived for a few years, and now we've only virtually met, and now I'm in Berlin, 16,000 kilometers away, and now you're right there basically where I was. It's like, what? But
it's like you can't script that.
nah, but it makes it all the better. But yeah, no, I agree with you, mate. But the one thing I've been really questioning recently is where do the limiting beliefs come from? Like where do the limits, like why the limits set that way? And I think a lot of it is also society. So if you look at our industry, right, it is so typically like, you get paid for time kind of thing. You exchange your time for money, which is a really poor option. It's a really poor option because the ceiling's very low.
Yeah.
And then, the people that we've kind of been talking about, like you see, it's people like Jordan Shallow and Pat Davidson and stuff like that actually have expanded their horizons. And they're really smart dudes too. So, they deserve nothing less, or they deserve nothing less generally. But you think like there's no reason why the next person can't do it, and why we can't do it, and why we can't dabble in other things, or maybe even try a different industry part-time. Like part of me would love to be a barista or roast coffee beans or just do something different, or like I really love photography. I just love taking photos. I don't know anything about photography, but I really really enjoy it. Imagine if I just
Yep.
was really good at it and knew a couple of people in the art network or photography network, and then I could crack through. There's nothing to say that can't happen. I'm not saying that I'm better than the next person, but there's no reason why I can't if I just happen to have an eye for it and I just manage to create, you know, the right things that fits that bill. Why can't that be
Yeah.
why can't that be complemented with like rehab and training and performance coaching? There's literally no reason why not, and it'd probably be funner because the balance is better. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Anyway,
interesting because there's something I've been pondering about lately, and it's kind of like the health and fitness industry. Because there seems to be very common people in the fitness industry that have like very similar stories that get into it because, we want to help people, and all those things. But it seems to be a very scarce, very competitive, very negative industry.
yeah,
Um, and it's quite interesting because, you said at the start, just before, scarce. And it's so true. Like, you just have to go on social media where people don't want to post their tool of how to fix someone's hip because they like don't want someone else to take it. Um,
uh,
and it's funny because even from like a financial standpoint, yes, you can leverage your time and get other people if you can replicate your service and that type of jazz. But if you're doing one to one, you've got a very low ceiling. Like as you said, you train time for money, and I guess it depends on how much you can raise that
yeah.
consult fee. But it'd be interesting to kind of see whether someone who came from a different industry, how they would kind of like view things, because I feel like I haven't experienced anything else. Like I haven't experienced what it's like to run a very successful big business or
Yeah.
be in like a industry where like there's not this kind of robbing each other. Um, and it'd be interesting to kind of get your thoughts on, do you think that people in the health and fitness industry need to do this work maybe more than others because they do have this scarce, maybe want to help other people because we can't help ourselves mentality? Um, it'd be interesting to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Um, oh, it's a really good question. You mean like the self-development work, like the personal stuff?
Yeah,
Just
because
yeah, for sure, for sure. I think everyone's different, but I think obviously we're talking more like as a society within the industry, right? So we do have to stereotype to simplify the discussion, but um, probably, man, because the other side of that is, we're dealing with people on a very psychological level. So what we deal with is theoretically very physical because that's how, again, it's taught in the uni. This is what society, how society shapes the industry on and our professions. But what we do is driven by thoughts and psychology, right? And that drives our physiology and our nervous system. So I think from one standpoint, I think it's just important that we do that because I think we'll better be able to help people. Um, and I think that the other side of it is uh, probably because I think, we've even spoken in the past about how, we used to even look at other people on Instagram and be jealous and that sort of stuff. And now we look at that and we go, yeah, well, why was that? Because that was our own insecurity and our own envy and stuff like that. But that's which is also fine. Which is also fine. Like I'm not saying I wouldn't condone it. It's clearly human instinct, and I'd say that almost everyone's like that to an extent. But I think that the thing that we've done that's been really positive, if not for everyone, but even just for us personally, is that we've actually kind of looked at it and try to figure out why that's happening in the patterns and be like, okay, ego, you can stay home today. We don't need any of that. And when you do that, all of a sudden, I don't know about you, but I just feel empowered to actually just help people and look after people. And I think if that's a product that, our industry would get more out of it, then absolutely fucking yes. Like I think everyone should do it. I think everyone should do it generally, but I think I think there would absolutely be a benefit if we were to look more into that, or even just to promote it, or even to question, like critically kind of question and go. Well, it's very hard to do research on it because things are very subjective, how people feel and stuff like that. But um, to actually critically question and say, can we get better outcomes in terms of rehabilitation and performance and training and pain and all of this? I mean, pain's the biggest thing. Like I used to have really significant eye strain issues to the point where I could barely work. and I found out that it was driven by mental things like emotions and um, frustration or anxiety and stress and stuff like that. And I never, I don't think we've spoken about this. And it was full on. And I saw 10 different specialists, and everyone was like, your eyes are really robust. Everything's really strong. I'm like, guys, I can't really even drive a car right now. And it was only once I started delving into it that all of this came out, and then it totally changed my whole perspective on it. And you see that all the time with pain issues and stuff like that, where you know there's a chronic pain related issue. And I think it's important for us to just clarify as well. There's a certain limit to our scope of practice with what we do, but I think it's also more than fair enough to say, hey, this looks pretty evident to us, and I think if we could get some some positive psychological change out of people, that would absolutely help their pain. um, yeah, maybe you can tell me your experiences about that, because I could go on about this forever, but I think it's your turn now.
Well, you kind of provoked saying that I want to kind of discuss and
Go for
talk
it.
about how thoughts and we want to influence physiology and all that type of stuff. And I guess something that kind of links the physiology and I guess the psychology is, in my opinion, like the autonomic system.
Yeah.
Sympathetic, parasympathetic, and we can modulate that, whether it's through thoughts or whether through its activity. And one of the things that I know you use, I use, and it's quite popular at the moment, is breathing. And I'd kind of like to hear how you view breathing. It's quite a bit of a hot topic, and I definitely have some strong opinions regarding it. But and also in regards to chronic pain, because a lot of people think chronic means it's a serious thing, whereas chronic just means the time frame.
Yeah.
Like it's been longer. I think than 3 months. I think that's what they kind of like label as. And when you think about that, you think about somebody who's stuck in a pattern. They're stuck in both the beliefs. Like they might not think they're going to get better. This is how life is. Can't really see it getting better. I've tried everything is usually an approach. But then you've also got, I guess, the motor control, the patterns, the behaviors from, I guess, a physical standpoint that person has. And that's where, I guess, breath can kind of influence both. It's going to influence the biomechanics through respiration, which is going to also change that rib cage, influences which is going to have an upstream and downstream effect. But you're also going to impact the parasympathetics if you breathe in a particular way. That's going to help kind of like reduce this threat on the system. So, yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, what's your thoughts on breathing? What's your thoughts on its role in rehab? And do you think it's too much of a hot topic, or do you think it's beneficial, but it's not everything?
I still think that breathing is underrated. I think breathing can be overrated from a strict biomechanical sense. So if we're talking about trying to get some movement from the joints and the bones, so looking at pardon me, looking at your rib cage and trying to expand that and how that changes our so basically, in simple terms, for anyone that's listening that's not really into this, what we want to do is we want to try and get some expansion of the rib cage. I think about like filling up a balloon, and we want to get that happening in all directions. People tend to just pop out at the front through the chest, and what that does is it reinforces a certain posture where we're sort of really closed at the back, really flared at the front. And what we want to do is just sort of change that and get a little bit more balance. And what that does is when we stand, then it gives us a little bit more balance between the rib cage and the pelvis, and then how we stand against gravity. So I use that all the time, and I've even questioned it. I've almost tried to prove it wrong, and I've had insane results out of it. But and I still use it in various ways. But the other side of it is, and particularly with COVID, so I've been working in a practice here. I've got my last week coming up, starting this week, actually tomorrow, in this practice. And over the last 13 months since I've been working there, I've seen so many people that have just been suffering based on lockdowns and stuff like that. And because of the lockdown and doing home office and a more sedentary lifestyle and what that's brought to them. And this is again habit building. You know, that is chronic. It was over 3 months. We had 7 months of lockdown in one hit. That is a chronic situation that that changed things for them chronically, physiologically, and probably psychologically as well. If I had my way and I didn't have time pressure or didn't have to manage numerous patients at once on the floor, what I would have probably done with a lot of them is just get them to lie down on their back with their knees bent, soles on the floor, close their eyes, just take out so much sensory input as much as possible, and just get them to breathe in through their nose and out through their nose. Just try and chill the fuck out, like get their nervous system to just chill the fuck out, because that's something that I think that's why I think it's underrated, mate, because it's still so under considered. Like how, so if we can't break through the nervous system and then nervous system's just completely cooked, it becomes really, really hard to influence positive change from a movement perspective, because we're kind of almost blocked. And I've done that with some patients. I've even recommended some patients just go home and just twice a day, just sit down or lie down, close your eyes, and just breathe in through your nose, slowly out through your nose. Just try and get deeper and slower each time. Just really relax. Try not to breathe in through your neck or pull your shoulders up. Just try to breathe in nice and easy and see what happens. And the second one that I've really focused on is getting particularly those patients who are really fearful and are really wound and may have these chronic pain presentations. It's often really hard to know. But getting them to use breathing to guide the tempo of the movement and to breathe throughout the exercise. And I basically explain that to them as a way to show the body, to show the system that it's actually totally okay, that they're doing something new, that they're stressing and loading their body, and that they don't have to be fearful. Because I think a lot of people get in such a fearful, they develop such a fearful mentality around loading and movement that they want to avoid it, and then they become scared of doing it. And then that reinforces a cycle. Then they stop breathing or they breathe in. And I think just getting them to really exhale and breathe out and breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth whilst they're moving, doing exercise and loading, I find that just teaches them, and then encouraging them whilst they're doing it, like actually giving them some really positive reinforcement, which they're probably not getting from themselves. I find that's just been such a game changer in so many ways. I'm not saying it eliminates things, but I find it's really been able to just turn things and get people over that hump to be able to realize, like, hey, I can actually do some movement and exercise and loading without breaking. Yeah, it's been a real game changer, mate. How have you found it?
Yeah, see, I reckon I view breathing a little bit differently, and I don't know what I kind of think about it. Like, start of the year, I was kind of like breathing, or maybe last year. Yeah, last year I think. Start of the year, and I used to do it on every single person, like give them breathing stuff, and it would make awesome changes like this. And I think that's like part of the reason, because when we think of functional movement, I think of like breathing, I think of walking, and I think of that's kind of like the language of the brain. And whenever you can speak that language or remind the brain using the breath, those things, the brain responds really quickly and you get these awesome results.
Yeah.
But I've kind of like moved away from thinking it's this awesome tool, that it's simply that, a tool in the toolkit. And I think it forms the foundation based off what we should then layer on top. Yeah. That's kind of like where I think I stand on now. And I think it also depends on the clientele you work with. Because there's always optimal and there's always realistic. And depending on your clientele, the buy-in to do a breathing drill can be quite hard. So I guess how you preface that, but then also you got to kind of think about the demands that you're kind of working with. And it's like, is this breathing exercise going to meet the demands of their activities? Because a lot of people that I work with are powerlifters, bodybuilders, gym-based clientele where they want to lift weights. And to get them to lie on their back and breathing can be quite a hard buy-in. That being said, it can also have great results when I have got people to kind of do it. And I think now I'm kind of leaning towards more that breathing is a great way to kind of tap into that autonomic nervous system the parasympathetic, rest and digest, get the person to chill the fuck out. Then that way, as you said, they're going to be more inclined to accept and integrate whatever tool or modality you give them. Because like when we think about like you're in a stress state, like you're running from a bear or someone, having a fight or an argument with any relationship in your life, it's like it can be very hard to accept or listen or take on what they're doing because you're in survival mode.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm kind of like going with. It's like breathing can be a great way to kind of get someone out of that state to then accept any modality you want to give them. Yeah. And it's also kind of a good way to kind of sense. So like, for example, a pairing that I love to do is like, they're lying on their back, reaching for the roof and exhaling to get like some of the pressure of the ribs, getting some contraction of the shoulder blades. I find it's a great way to kind of start sensing what it's like to get those ribs to kind of breathe in. So when we breathe in, obviously the ribs comes up. When we exhale, the ribs come down and wrap around our body. That exhale people aren't used to doing.
Yep.
And there's two things I kind of want to talk about is one, just in life. Like I always joke to people, I say that I reckon smoking is such a stress reductant because it's like that person for 5 minutes is exhaling as long as they want. And it's like they're getting that exhale and it's like,
that's a really good point.
Yeah, it's like how many times do people, pack a day smoking 20 times a day, they're going out for 5 minutes to exhale as long as possible. It's like, you don't do that, and it's like, no wonder it's like addictive because it's like, how good do you feel when you just stop and breathe? Like right now, it's like, obviously I don't want to breathe in front of the microphone, but it's like, sometimes we just need to stop and chill out.
Yeah.
And, so that's one reason I like that exercise is just to get someone to see what it's like to exhale, get that movement in that rib cage that they're probably used to. And then the second thing that I usually do is like get them to sense that because when you add an exercise that's, I guess, more intense or it's got more stimulation. So let's just say an arm bar where you're lying on your back, you've got a kettlebell or a dumbbell and you just reach for the roof, protract that shoulder blade, inhale, then come back down with a straight arm. Well, that's kind of like the same exercise as the one prior. We're now just added load, which is increased intensity. But if that person didn't know what it was like to sense those ribs depressing, they're not going to maximize that exercise when we do it. And I think another thing to touch on with you talked about is you like people to breathe throughout exercise. Well, a lot of people in the gym, they like to hold their breath. It's a way of, being stiff to produce as much force as they can. But we know that over time, this is going to reduce relative range of motion because we're not going through a full range of motion. We're not increasing those relative motions between joints, which I believe that's where the breath comes in. It creates space. It helps distribute that force. And that's why I think it can have such a profound impact. But for me, I think based off the clientele I work with, it's the foundation on which I then build things up on. Because I've found that when I did breathing alone, it wasn't enough stimulus to meet the demands of their sport. And also from a buy-in standpoint, it can be quite tricky at times.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I use the way I define breathing in my programming is that it gives me options for the next step. So it gives them better movement options so that they can perform better in whatever they're going to do. The first thing is to explain that clearly. And the second thing is to prove it by getting them to do it and actually feel better. And I think oftentimes, like if someone's got restricted neck range of motion or shoulder range of motion, we can pretty quickly get quite a significant increase based on just after, one set of 5 breaths if they do it properly. And I think just doing that, it's not to say like, oh, if you do this, it's always breathing's always going to fix everything, or work for everything. But it just is a reinforcement to say like, hey, this shows you what we actually can do. Now that you've actually got more range of motion in your shoulder, or now that you can turn your head and rotate your head a lot better, a lot further, let's actually use that newfound range of motion and actually do something with it. Because otherwise it can become a limiting factor. Because on the other side of that, so we spoke about 2 very different populations of people that we're working with. So I was more speaking about the general population type that's been doing home office, that's really highly wound, that we need to just get to chill the fuck out. Whereas you spoke more specifically about performance, performance trainers or athletes or something that are more in that performance realm, who actually need to be wound up in order to perform better. We actually need to stimulate them. So breathing, if that's going to bring them down too much, then that's also a question about a potential trade-off. Something I've not looked enough into. It's something I've questioned a lot. But with the guys that I've been working with and done breathing, prior to performance-based stuff, I've just come to the conclusion with myself, or the agreement with myself, that the range of motion benefits and the movement option benefits just outweighed the lack of stimulation. So yeah, it's an interesting one, mate. I think particularly, it is a hot topic, and I think that's why I still think it's underrated, though, because it's the foundation of what we do. As you said, it's the language of it is a language of being a human. And for example, I worked with a 14-year-old, I think she was, a few months ago, and I tried to get her to breathe, and she's just super stuck. 14 years old, had like super stuck through her upper back and super compressed. And I tried to get her to inhale, couldn't inhale for 1 second. I could not get a whole 1 second inhale. And so the problem with that is people like that can't exhale. Like they really struggle to exhale because they're just so wound up, and they're already inhaled before they even inhale. So if for anyone that kind of doesn't understand that, if you just breathe in 5 times through your nose without exhaling, and then you try to breathe in that 6th time through your nose and inhale, it's a lot harder than the first one. So the way that we need to release that is by actually getting someone to fully exhale and teaching someone to exhale. But I've seen that so much recently, people that just can't inhale and they can't exhale, and they're just stuck. They're just stuck. So what they start to do is pull with their neck, and we're just reinforcing a crappy movement pattern. Yeah, it's a bit sad, really. It's a bit sad, but yes, understanding all those different types of it, or all those different facets of breathing and the physiology and sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system presentations, I think it also does give us, for sure, another arm to what we do, Ash. And I think that's a real beautiful thing, because it allows us to make some really good changes. And I'm really confident then, in my ability or our abilities to be able to do that. And I think that's something that's really, really awesome. Yeah. Any closing points on that topic, or should we move on?
I think we address quite a lot of the, I guess, common thoughts and ways to utilize that breath work.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think it definitely is underrated. I'm just, as you know, I'm pretty anti single systems, and I think when someone thinks breathing is everything, or their only approach, well, that's like, it's more important than other approaches. I think that's where people can kind of fall into a trap. But I think for 95% of, if not everyone, I think we could all benefit from some form of breath work, because holistically we don't really do it. And we could always argue why breathing might not be the only reason, but it's like, if you're not doing it in the first place, it's such a big low-hanging fruit. So I think it's like, integrate that, utilize that, but then realize that it's not everything. And then that's where you kind of bring in all these other, I guess, these tools that we've kind of learned.
Yeah. But would you be in agreement with me, though, to say that with COVID and lockdowns and stuff like that, I don't know how it's been for you, because now you're back in practice 3 days a week, right? And so I'm sure you're seeing, I don't know what your population's like there, but I imagine you're seeing a lot of general populations patients, and I imagine a lot of them are coming in and they're pretty stressed. And I was spoken to my mentor about this a few months ago. He was also just saying, the most people I'm seeing, their nervous systems are cooked. And it's been the same here in Berlin. And would you be in agreement, though, to say that with those populations, breathing, so targeted breathing, so I don't mean just getting them to necessarily lie on their back, but encouraging them on pattern breathing, so maybe be it through movement or even just statically, just to actually get a feel for the pattern of breathing, inhalation, exhalation. Would you agree that could have the biggest benefit initially. Because I'm personally like I've gotten, and and I can only talk sort of anecdotally from my own experiences, but I've found so much positive change, not just in that, but also educating them on why and how. And then if you can get people to do it, and then you set, like, if you just say to people, we're going to do like let's just say you get them to do a lunge. I just want you to breathe, inhale through your nose on the way down, exhale through your mouth on the way up. And you get them to time their lunge, maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds down, 3 seconds up, based on that breathing. After 15 reps or 12 reps, you ask them how they feel. I just find that most people feel a lot better. And if you say like, yeah, well, and look what you just did. You actually just did this, and now you're breathing, and you seem a lot like everything just feels a lot more relaxed. So you can kind of almost get them to do it. Then after you show them retrospectively, like, hey, you've just done some really cool shit. Maybe things are okay, and you really put a positive light on it. I personally think that that's probably one of the lowest hanging fruits and most positive things I've been able to influence. But I'd be interested if you disagree with that, based on the way you've been speaking.
No, I think I definitely agree. I think, because whether it's from like a stress reduction, whether it's from like increasing relative motion or how a joint moves, or even just like, as you said, like focusing on the exhale, giving them movement options, giving them the other side of the continuum, the side that they don't usually incorporate or think about. I think, as you said, you can get such a great return and in such short a period of time. And it shows someone that something as simple as breathing is part of the process. Because I think if you layer on all these other cool things, it's everything that sexy sells. I think people then attach, that's why I got better. Yeah. Whereas if you can use a KPI and be like, whether it's just shoulder range of motion, you do some breathing drills and bang, it feels better, you get more range of motion. That's extremely powerful because you go, and I always say, it's like you just did 5 reps. And they're like, and then it's like you then have, I guess, the buy-in to then educate them and also get them to potentially do it outside the treatment room or the clinic or, whatever space you use. So I think that definitely, as I said, it's the foundation 100%. And I think, depending on the client, you sometimes go above that foundation. But from an entry level standpoint, I think all humans, especially in COVID, we're seeing the importance of kind of like slowing down, learning to exhale, learning to breathe, learning to get out of this stress state, which is then going to allow, us to layer everything else on. So yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think people often lose sight about what's most important. And so, I think particularly here in Germany, maybe I'm being a bit hard on the industry here, but just from based on what my experience is here, everything is very pro, muscle, like building muscle and strength and this and that. But at the end of the day, most people just want to feel better. And so if it is just breathing that's going to influence that, or some targeted breathing as a tempo guider throughout, loaded exercises, and that makes them feel better, and they over a 6-week period, they build less muscle but feel better, I'd be asking myself and them what's more worth it. And I can guarantee that most of them will say, yeah, I just want to feel better. But I think perhaps as practitioners and coaches and trainers, I think a lot of people perhaps get lost in both sides of it. One, they just get too targeted on breathing, but the other side of it, they just get too targeted in like, yeah, we need to,
fancy.
Or yeah, almost like having biases almost towards their own goals and then filtering that out on clients. Do you know how I mean that? It's like, yeah, well, they've just done a course, or they're doing like a pretty heavily loaded program, and then they're trying to consciously or unconsciously basically put that on their client. And I think that can also be a really, really slippery slope, which happens really fucking often. And I think it's something that's probably still underestimated how often that happens. Which again, like I said last week, makes our job really hard. It makes our job really 100%.
Hard. Like, I remember when I was PT at Fitness First Richmond, and you do all these courses and you come out of them and you're like, can't wait to use that protocol. Wave load in 3-2-1, 3-2-1. Going to get my clients super strong, and you just want to use all these things. And I remember my first year of PT. It's like I was doing the most simple stuff. I don't think I even had someone back squatting with a barbell because they weren't ready for that. It was too complex for a lot of these people. And that's where it's like important to realize it's like, what does the client need? And like, what do they want versus what do you want them to do? Like, you don't need to be putting chains on and doing all these crazy things because you do it in your training where one of your top values is probably training and performance, whereas this Gen Pop person might be family and business and everything else and relationships. And I think that's quite important what you said, because the thing with breathing is it's not sexy and it's kind of like too simple in a way. It's like, nah, I'd rather do. I can't even think off the top of my head, but like do something really like complex, some very complex exercise that looks so tough that makes you look like you know what you're on about and that no one else can do it. And it's like, what does the client in front of you want? And
Yeah.
I think you touched on it. It's like they want to feel good. They want to be able to put on their jeans. They want to be able to go for a walk with their friends and get a coffee. And it also depends on the clientele because, as I said, a lot of my clientele is bodybuilding and powerlifters, which is different. But again, it comes down to what does the client in front of you want, and are you taking that into consideration? Are you truly listening, or are you trying to put that new technique or rehab exercise or something that looks fancy on the gram on your client because you think it looks cool and makes you look smart?
Do you think that's just an ego thing from a coach's perspective or practitioner's perspective?
I think so, because it's always cool. And this comes from like how I've thought in the past, where it's like my client, they got to the 40-kilogram dumbbells for chest press in like 8 weeks. It was awesome. Like, can you do that type of thing? Like, my client's better than yours, or look at how far my client's kind of gone. It's like it's kind of like trying to reinforce that you've done a good job. Whereas what does the client say? Does the client say, look, my trainer's like, awesome and all these things? Like, was that your goal that you wanted for them, or was that actually their goal?
Yeah. And who celebrates it? Because you don't need to celebrate. The only person who needs to celebrate that is them and perhaps their family or their closest friendship group, right?
Yeah, and I've definitely celebrated those things. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, like, what somebody's killing it, like,
But have you celebrated for them or for you? Because they're two really different things. Because I think we've all been there where we're just celebrating it for us and being like, yeah, well, I'm fucking awesome right now. And then you have that phase where I'm sure we've all had that phase where after like a few years, you just go, yeah, I kind of, I'm killing it. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And then I'm kind of at the phase now again where I'm like, I think I'm quite educated. I think I'm quite experienced, but God, there is a lot that I don't know, and there's a lot that I probably can't do, and that's totally okay. But I'll just keep chipping away at it. And I look at that from a mentality switch, and I find that so profound, man. I find that so profound. Yeah.
It's a good question. I think there's definitely some celebration that comes from seeing how far your clients come and seeing that it wasn't even a possibility for them, and now it's like kind of like they want more. So I think there definitely is both. I think you definitely celebrate their wins. Like being a strong element of celebrating, kind of reinforces like, yeah, I did good. Like, look at me type thing. For me personally, I know in the past, but that's definitely taken a change, a full 180 in a way in the last 18 months or so.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that we shouldn't celebrate the wins from our clients. Like I had a couple of sessions last week online, good mate of mine in Scotland and then one in Australia where really working on improving the capacity of my mate's ankle. He's been out of football for 3 months. I used to play with a really good footballer. And so just seeing him mentally switch throughout that hour that we worked together, and then also with the client in Australia, just did an analysis and seeing how they're taking it on and that they feel better for it. Like I bounced out of the room. I felt fucking awesome. I'm not going to deny that. but it's more of like it's more of like a communal celebration rather than just being like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm awesome, I can do anything right now. And yeah,
Mm.
it's an interesting change on things, but I think it's nice to see the changes. I think it's nice to see the changes.
Question for you.
Yeah.
This is something I've been thinking about over the last few days. Do you think that practitioners should market themselves, or do you think that their results and their referrals and all that should speak for themselves and they should do it? Because, again, been reading a book and it kind of talks about that if you have a service that you believe honestly provides value and helps people, then you should be marketing it. Like, you're not, I guess, wanting to brag. It's like you want to help people, and if people can't, if they can't see it in front of them or become aware of it, well, then you're not going to be able to help them. But then I also understand that sometimes it is nicer just to sit back a little bit and have your referrals from your work and success kind of bring you more work. But I'd be curious to hear what you kind of think, because I'm at two minds right now.
So am I. I'm kind of right in the middle of this at the moment. Like I've created a couple of products that I think are really, really good. And they're proving to be good, to be honest. They're proving to be good with my clientele, which is the most important thing. The question is how do you market that? How do you push that? It's something that I'm getting a lot better at and getting more confident at, because it's not easy. On the other end of that, though, you've got people who are just really good marketers and probably not very good at what they do. And so that becomes strictly a marketing thing rather than a quality of service thing. And I think it's really, really hard to separate those two, or to define the differences between those types of practitioners. Do you know what I mean? So I think, I'm very confident that we both deliver a very high quality service. But then if you've got other people who perhaps, maybe aren't as qualified, aren't as experienced, and don't care as much. I think that's the most important thing. I think the difference is that we really, really care. And there's people who just look at the dollar signs but are really good at marketing. Maybe if they're thrown a few K into marketing, maybe they will get more out of it. But how does the client or the patient know? So I think, so to answer your question, before you answer that, I think yes, I think we should market it. I think we should go for it. I think we should also just show, proof of results. But how do you do that so that people can define the difference?
It's a good question.
And that's where it gets really fucking hard. And that's the art of marketing, right?
I think I don't know if this is the right way, but it's something that I kind of do myself, and I've observed with a lot of other people that kind of sell packages and high-end products, is they're willing to kind of give away some free time. They'll do like a discovery call, kind of get to know about you before they kind of like talk about the price, the cost, and whether they want to go forward. Like I recently had a coach a few days ago. I'm looking at getting a speaking and presenting coach. And the package, it's definitely it's a premium service. But they took the time, had a 30-minute discovery call, got to know me, got to see if we were the right fit. We kind of got to see what we were like, I guess. I hate the word, but energetic level, like, do we click, all that type of stuff. And now it's like, all right, I feel like I trust the guy. I like the vision that he kind of saw for me. And now I'm ready to go forward. And maybe that's kind of like how people kind of get to know. It's like, market your service, market it, like put it out there, make sure people can kind of like come across it, because otherwise they won't know about it, they won't find it. And then maybe it's a combination of, giving a call and kind of seeing if you can problem solve, because I think your results brings a level of confidence. For sure. And that person will probably pick up on whether you have that confidence and that understanding on that call. Because if you haven't got results or you don't know what you're talking about, you're not going to have that confidence, and that person will know. So maybe that's how you do it. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at, what I've observed, what I'm pondering. But it makes sense. It makes sense to me.
So do you market then the call at the start, or do you market the bigger package then?
I'd probably go the package.
Yeah. And then you say that within that, like at the end, like let's link up for a chat.
Yeah, or just have like, maybe you market it everywhere and then people are like, what's this thing? They might come to your page, go to your link tree, see a discovery call, cool, book in, that type of stuff, and that kind of starts the process.
Yeah, there's a whole art to it. There's a whole art to it. I mean, it's not easy. I think this is what we're talking about being in our industry, what we we're talking about earlier, being very kind of we're stuck in our ways. I think a lot as practitioners, it would really help. I think doing a business course as a maybe like I think a business course should I was going to say a business subject should be a core subject in every sports and rehabilitation based university undergrad degree, because we're inherently not very good at it. And maybe throughout that we'd learn about marketing. Like marketing's everywhere. Marketing is everywhere. We just don't see half of it. But I mean, we need to be able to figure it out. I work for myself, you work for yourself to an extent. A lot of really good practitioners work for themselves, and either they've already proven themselves and they've already got the market and they can kind of feed off that, or they've got to market themselves. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. But I think it's getting the balance of, I think if you get too salesy as well, I think like that would put me off. And I think it put a lot of potential clients off as well, because they don't want to just be sold shit all the time. What people want is they want vulnerability, they want empathy, they want that human connection, which is exactly what you were saying, I get out of that discovery call, which I do as well. I think it's super important just to understand people better, because maybe you can't help them, but maybe you can refer them on to someone else. And for that, they'll be very grateful. And then you've just done a good deed for the day. But yeah, I think people want it. We're inherently vulnerable and insecure people who kind of need attention and emotional connection. And I think that's what you get out of that call. Whereas if we're just marketing people the whole time trying to sell a product, I don't know, gets a little bit sickening.
Would you say that vulnerability and that emotional regulation or like discussion is marketing though? I think
absolutely, but I think go on.
The way I kind of view it is like marketing. So I think we have glitched for a bit. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like how you view it, hey? Because if you kind of viewed, I guess, the marketing that, I know what you're talking about, it's like in your face, it's go, go, go. It's like, like, whoa, like back off type thing. But then it's also like, if you reframed it, that discovery call and getting to know that person and being vulnerable and I guess evoking those emotions of being able to help them, that's also marketing. So yeah, I guess that's a topic for a different day, I think. But I think it's one of those things that's really subjective and kind of up to interpretation, because what we think and what our audience or our what you think, it's probably going to be all different. And what's really pushy for someone might be not for another person, which kind of makes it hard to chat about.
Which is also okay. I had a discovery call before I'll get back to that most recent point in a sec, but I had a discovery call or a chat with a guy 2 weeks ago almost. And I think he just seemed to want a lot for not much. And kind of, I was explaining how, systems don't work in isolation in the human body. And he'd had some pretty serious back issues and wanted to run again, but, just didn't seem to be willing to invest or buy into my approach, which is also okay. I'm not sure that that's a wise option for him. Not saying that he should work with me, but I think it would benefit him and perhaps his pain and his goals to try and think a little bit more globally. But that's also totally okay that it didn't work out. I think going back to the point about the empathy and all of that, I think at the end of the day, I try to separate myself. I'm not even separate myself. I just try to do my thing from an ethical standpoint, and the more I kind of think about things and try to make myself a better person for the now and for the future, I think the more I just realize that it doesn't really fucking matter what everyone else is doing. And if I'm an ethical person and I stand by my ethics and principles, and I keep that integrity where I think it should be, or that level of integrity, my English is terrible, then I think then I think then that's all that matters. Do you know what I mean? And if I just
Yeah.
trust myself and I back myself, then who gives a fuck what anyone else does, mate? Simply put. So
Yeah, sweet. I think that's a good a good finishing line for today's episode. But
back at it next week,
yeah,
big boy.
that's
Back
it.
at it next
Episode
week.
done. Tick.
And so we'll be back in a week, and time to get some guests on, hey?
That's good.
All right, mate. Have a good night.
Take care.
Ciao.